Hi, my name is Ruby and I'm the Executive Director of TEDx Amherst. Juliana Denrich is a New York-based poet and UMass Amherst alum, motivated to share stories that bring attention to the world's injustices. She is currently training to be a yoga teacher so that she can further explore the intersections of advocacy and consciousness. Inspired by her ancestry, Juliana hopes to honor the lives of those who paved the way before her by bringing light to the reality of our lives. Juliana's talk explores the way language has been warped and how it's time to reclaim rhetoric. Ladies and gentlemen, Juliana Denrich.
What do you have the balls to do? Would you jump out of an airplane, quit your job, or profess your love for a longtime friend? Maybe a better question is, what don't you have the balls to do? What are all of the things you wish you can do or say, but don't? How many times a day are you holding back? Personally, this number isn't very high. I am constantly saying what is on my mind. A couple of years ago, I was at an NHL hockey game, and the boys in front of me were calling the players pussies. And not just one time, they were repeat offenders. It's worth noting that they were rooting for the opposing team, but they would call out things like, "You bunch of pussies," "Take that, you pussy," "Yeah, you didn't make that shot, pussy." So, when the opportunity to call them out arose, it was my turn to take a shot. At the end of the period, we locked eyes, and when I knew I was reaching the depths of their soul, I said, "My pussy is stronger than you'll ever be. Shut the fuck up." Now, I don't know if you can tell, but I am a whopping 5 feet tall and weigh about as much as a Rottweiler. So for now, I'll let you imagine how the rest of the conversation went. The point is, I had the pussy to reclaim my pussy for all its strength and glory, for its ability to bear life and spit it out, to be the genesis of the miracle that is existence. The reason why we can all be listening to this talk. Balls, on the other hand, flinch at the sight of a challenge. The temperature drops and balls literally shrink for safety. Yet, we talk about balls like they're the reason the human race is standing. What do you have the balls to do? Well, that's not a very deep question anymore, is it? Now I can anticipate someone saying, "Juliana, it's not that big of a deal." But it is. My anatomy is interchangeably interchangeably with the words weak, lesser than, or just bad, while the male anatomy is trophied with a definition of strength, courage, and moxie. The implications of this seemingly subtle phenomena are only one symptom of toxic masculinity. Because, let's be honest, no one wants to use the word pussy in public to talk about vaginas. Like right now, I bet that half of you are flinching in your seats just listening to me say the word pussy. And I know that you're begging me not to say the word cunt either. Then we would be talking serious business. Cunt holds more power than pussy does. We know that it's okay to hear the words pussy and cunt in porn or at hockey games. But if we have to talk about the legitimacy of being a pussy owner, the legitimacy of bloody bedsheets and period cramps, of sexist coworkers and catcallers, of our fear of walking home alone at night or traumatic nights in frat house basements, bars, classrooms, places of work, well, then the conversation is shut down. What we say matters. Right now, the words I'm saying are creating ideas, thoughts, and opinions in your head, and the impact that words have on the feminist movement is important. Now I know what you're thinking. Here she goes using the F word. Fucking feminism. So before I go any further, let me tell you that the definition of feminism is just gender equality. It's about an even playing field, equal pay, and non-negotiable mutual respect for our bodies, careers, and life choices. It's about reparations for women of color, acknowledgement and love for trans women, and a long overdue call to action that prioritizes anyone with a vagina. It's about teaching kids from a young age that there is no superior or inferior gender, sex, or body. Now, It's proven that words shape our reality. Think about affirmations. I have a mantra. My value is not attached to my productivity. I have bountiful success. When you believe in yourself, despite your flaws and failures, inherent happiness is more achievable. Because when you accept your entirety, insecurity is less likely to get in your way. On the contrary, if you are always talking about your downfalls, the reasons why you can't succeed or can't be loved, then you will be the person standing in the way of your smiles. And I understand. This isn't easy when you've been listening to a lifetime of negative self-talk or experienced trauma. But reclaiming that headspace to be filled with positive value and encouragement is a skill that turns to truth. The same goes for reclaiming our vocabulary outside of the self. So when we use words that throw shade to, negatively portray, or denounce womanhood, we are inherently bringing life to that cause. And let me be clear in this. Womanhood is not exclusive to cisgender females. Now, the word pussy is not the only word in need of reclamation. Am I right, bitches? At the end of the night, out with my greatest friends, an outstanding "I love you, bitches" blows up my phone. This is what we love to hear. These are my people, my bitches. So when is it not okay to call someone a bitch? Simply any time you are using it as an insult. If, for example, we replace the word pussy for the word bitch that night at the hockey game, the intent of those statements would stay the same. You bunch of pussies, you bunch of bitches. Yeah, you didn't make that shot, you pussy. Yeah, you didn't make that shot, you bitch. The words pussy and bitch suffer from the same problem, meaning they have been defined, claimed, and shaped by the male gaze. They have been used as a tool to mobilize toxic masculinity, and because we have endowed them with a double meaning, we are left with an open opportunity to gaslight pussy owners out of the severity of the ways their bodies can be connected to negative connotations. That night at Madison Square Garden, those boys looked me right in the eye and said, "We didn't say that. You heard us wrong." And when it was clear I would not budge, their last rebuttal was, "We didn't mean it like that." But they did. They were just caught, and guilt has a funny way of following denial, so they took their opportunity to gaslight me into thinking that it was not a big deal that my body was being thrown around in the middle of New York City to describe failure on an ice rink. The patriarchy thrives off of the minute details that secure its power. Don't be a Debbie Downer, and don't get your panties in a twist. Keyword Debbie, keyword panties. Most obviously, every device that serves us is given a female voice. Alexa, can you play this song? Alexa, call dad. Alexa, schedule this meeting. Alexa, go. Alexa, play. Alexa, stop. Damn it, Alexa, shut up. There is a constant need to attach the negative to feminine, and it's not just men who abuse the shit out of these words. Internalized misogyny is real. From a young age, women are taught to be in constant competition with each other over things like appearance, material items, and of course, over one thing that often feels more valuable than gold: attention. Which is not to say that the desire for attention is wrong. Quite the opposite. The desire to feel seen, wanted, and heard is human. What's wrong is the way we are pit against each other. We might not always admit it, but we have all been caught guilty of calling that other girl a bitch or cunt out of pure jealousy, spite, or anger. You might even go as far as to call her a whore, as if sex work is not real work, as if sex work is as demeaning as men want us to believe it is, which is ironic, considering that porn is a multi-billion-dollar earning industry. Yet, we talk about sex workers like they do not belong into society, like their work does not serve us or goes against the grain of our experience. The biggest sin is that we talk about sex workers like they're nothing else. They are not properly protected by law, which makes the industry scary, hard, and high risk. Sex work is work. And to call each other whores out of petty spite, anger, or ego is insulting to sex workers, their legitimacy, and their humanity. But we have been trained to be active participants in a male-dominated society. It wants us to feel that way. It wants us to feel shame for our bodies outside of their gaze and to give it away when they decide it's time to feast. To pit woman against woman, to use the word bitch like steel tongue armor, to use the word pussy at any sign of emotion, sensitivity, or a glimpse of failure, as if those things that make us human are reserved for people with pussies and are therefore inherently weak. Male-dominated societies like ours use vocabulary to gaslight, shame, divide, and conquer women, and I know you'll believe me when I tell you it isn't always subtle, silent, or passive. Abuse, trauma, and depression are nuanced. Sometimes it whispers, and sometimes it's screaming. You stupid ass bitch. You flirted with that guy at the bar. I saw you. You dumb cunt. You're a fucking whore. You belong to me. Only to later insist that this is love. I just love you so much. I can't bear to see you with anyone else. I love you. Believe me, it won't happen again. The patriarchy is manipulative and conniving, and most of all, hungry. It has played savior over and over again and is a professional at creating Stockholm Syndrome. But there is no savior who creates trauma, who thrives off of power and ego. We are our own saviors. We decide when we're ready to forgive and forget, change and grow. When someone lends you a hand, lifts you up, it's called being a friend. It's called love. It's called compassion and empathy. We can choose to be those things every single day. Loving, compassionate, and empathetic. In fact, no one deserves that treatment more than you do. Be kind to yourself as you learn new things that make you flinch or burn. This is what neuroplasticity is for. We can literally change the hardware of our brains to learn new habits, processes, and practices. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to form and reorganize connections in response to learning and experience. In this case, we can use our neuroplasticity to learn how toxic verbiage insults all pussies. I'm not here to shame you. I, too, have contributed to the toxicity that hands power to men. To be honest, we will continue to do so for a long time because even with our newfound and ever-growing awareness, learning is hard. Debatably, unlearning is harder. Challenging ourselves to sit in the discomfort of our lessons is what turns them into habits and later into thoughts, beliefs, and passions. This mass unlearning is something we can all be a part of, and there are goals we can work towards every single day to change even the most passive parts of sexism. The first goal is accountability. When you call that girl a bitch because she hurt you, even if she hurt you bad, let the light bulb go on. When you call him a pussy for not chugging that extra beer with you, let the light bulb go on. When you call her a whore for putting her body in display in that outfit, and you know what outfit I'm talking about, let the light bulb go on. Challenge yourself and challenge others. Don't be a bystander in the name of your ego. People are mean, selfish, and insecure, but they aren't bitches. People are weak, people fail, and people cheat. But they aren't pussies, cunts, or whores. They're human, and so are you. Noticing our own humanity is what will allow us to have grace in the face of our own hurt. And when you slip up, catch yourself and take note. Embrace that aha moment. The second goal is reclamation. For people with vaginas, this means owning that accountability I just talked about, addressing your pussy positively and as you see fit, and offering support for all of your bitches. However, let me be clear in this. Cisgender men are not in the position to redefine words that they have corrupted. They are in the position to double up on accountability and call each other out. So that while we're out there reclaiming our pussies, men are out there defending them. This means speaking up for sex workers, listening to survivors of sexual assault, and
Hi, my name is Ruby, and I'm the executive director of TEDx Amherst. Juliana Denrich is a New York-based poet. Hi, my name is Ruby, and I'm the executive director of TEDx Amherst. Juliana Denrich is a New York-based
So thank you. We've been working on it for a year, so I know how much effort has gone into it.
Yes, you do. You too know.
Change my So we're gonna wait for a few more minutes for people to trickle in, and then you can ask questions in the chat, and then I can facilitate and answer questions to Juliana and have a conversation that way.
Oh.
Did your family get to tune in?
Yes, they're on here right now, actually.
Fantastic. So I know how much.
Oh, that's, Jason, turn off your audio. There you go. That's my brother.
Are you in New York right now?
Yes, yeah, I am.
I
We're
was
all
glad
here.
to celebrate this fantastic achievement.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks. Let's see.
We can start it off. As and when you have questions, you can please pop in the chat. Yeah, Ruby, you can start recording this. So
This meeting is being recorded.
I think the first question I'd like to start off with is, we heard the story of what made you, what was a pivotal movement in making you figuring this out, but can you talk a little bit into what led to you feeling the role that linguistics play in feminism?
Yeah, I just had actually taken a class in linguistics. My first ever class at UMass was a class in linguistics. And I was totally out of place. I was the only freshman in the class. I don't know why my guidance counselor really allowed me even to take the course. But I was really fascinated by linguistics when I had the opportunity to take that class. And immediately I started to note, or since then, I should say, I had started to notice all these different meanings and all these different words and how subtle we were using them and how much, I mean, I'm a poet, as mentioned, so words matter so much to me. And so when I took this
time and effort in order to unlearning a few things, inconveniencing yourself a little bit, putting that little bit of effort to rethink the words and the vocabulary that would aptly convey what you want. And if doing that is going to better your life. For a lot of the people I was speaking to, they felt that this was an inconvenience that's taking away from other good things they were doing in their life. So I think it's going to be a hard battle for sure, these conversations, but the more we have them, the more it becomes a normal thing to challenge. I think that's important.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people feel that way. They're like, well, why do I have to? It's not that big of a deal, like I say. The difference between like dick and pussy is that, not that dicks are inherently weak, but they're simply not vaginas. They are not the givers of life. They do not do what dicks do. So I mean, that's a hard one. I'm not going to say that I haven't used the word dick, and I still do not use the word dick because I definitely do. But it's probably a better goal for us to all just keep genitalia out of it.
A personal thought on that was that as someone who's been forcing themselves to kind of not use either of the genitalia to express what I want, I feel that it comes down to the integrity of a person's words and the power that a person emanates from not using those words.
Mm-hmm.
I really feel that. I feel that when I call somebody out, there is no room for them to talk back at me or question my heart in the matter or my bias in the matter.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes a long way whether or not you actually believe that the impact that the words have on either of those genders are the same. It's about being able to call them out. And I think it matters if it's a fight you're willing to take.
Yeah.
I think I'm reminded of a Hassan Minaj episode. I don't know if you're familiar with the Patriot Act, but in that he talks about how the world is ravaged by so many problems that you get to pick like 5 and you get to fight for 5 problems. You can decide which those 5 are going to be, but pick them and then fight to your heart's delight on them.
That's so true. We can't all fight every battle. It's impossible. I care about so many things, but it's impossible for me to be, completely educated and ruthlessly, fighting for all of them.
Another question from Sunita. Do you think people could even use the word pussy in a good way? For example, say someone from people's lovers. Say coming from
Yeah.
people's lovers, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you're talking about a literal vagina in the context of like lovers or anything like that, I don't think that that's bad or shameful. I just think it comes down to even how I said like the word bitch. If you're using it negatively, that's where the problems come up. But if it's part of love and sex, I mean, it is a vagina. So
Okay, there is another question from Daniel Keaton Jr. Can I call my friends slut in a positive, enthusiastic way to demonstrate camaraderie?
I just had this conversation yesterday with a few friends, or 2 days ago, actually. We were in the car and we were talking about the difference between the word slut and whore. Because whore literally references sex workers, whereas a slut is not so, directed at sex workers. A slut just might be a person who sleeps around. Of course, that's like born from being a whore again. But their origins are a little bit different. I don't know. I don't use the word slut really ever, to be honest with you. It's not a word that I grew up saying a lot. To me, I wouldn't say it just because I think it's a little bit too close to whore. I know people would probably argue with me and say that it's more similar to bitch, considering it like doesn't have that origin to something so tangible like pussy or whore does. I think that if you have to think about it, you should probably not say it.
That's a good rule of thumb.
Yeah.
Another question from Melanie. What do you think of the use of derogatory words in popular media, like songs, rap, etc.? Oh, that's interesting. And especially when they may have an empowering connotation in some cases.
Yeah. I mean, I think if they're empowering, I think all the power to them. I mean, like I said in my talk, I mean, I went on a stage to talk about all of these things. I didn't, cover up the fact that I was going to say the word pussy 30 times. So I think if it serves a purpose and if it's empowering and it's meant to make people feel good, I think that's totally fine. When it's, talking about like demolishing pussies or like demolishing women and, all of this sex or demolishing bitches or, whatever is coming, that's not okay.
Yeah. I think that's been a popular debate in a lot of cases as well, with rap music having that popular place in modern society, and at the same time making a lot of things okay.
Yeah.
It's a hard battle.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's like, I mean, obviously I love the song WAP, so I'm here for that. We're here for that. But, I mean, that's a good example of the song that's empowering for women, because now we listen to it on the radio and we have to bleep out the word pussy because we've been trained to think that that's a bad word in any context. But
So
in that context, I mean, if you don't know that pussies get wet, I mean,
definitely not gonna lie. When we started working on this conversation, this talk, the first thought that came to my mind is Ted gonna allow this?
Yeah. I texted Ruby frantic. I'm like, do you think they're gonna post this?
Yeah, it's like, are we really gonna be able to put this out there without bleeping? But I think when we heard and understood the content of your conversation, it became clear that it's more important now than ever to put it out there without bleeping and reclaim that word, like you said. But it brings me back to a very interesting conversation that we had at the very beginning, which I feel it's important for the audience here to hear. You came up with a question and you asked me if you have the credibility to talk about this. And I think it's important why I want to hear from you why you asked that question and why you decided that you do have the credibility to talk about it.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, I mean, to be honest with you, like I've told, the TED team, like I don't have a degree in women's studies. I studied economics at UMass. I had a minor in information technology and an additional minor in studio art. So feminism was something that I found outside of the classroom. I would say I probably had a couple of high school teachers who, introduced me to it, and my passion for being an advocate for women was born there. But like I've said to the TED team, I don't think that you have to be an advocate for anybody. I don't think you need to have a degree to talk about it. And not just an advocate. I mean, people learn so much outside of classrooms and outside of these like formal settings and outside of certificates. The education system is really just, one big sort of stamp of approval, or like normal type of saying, okay, you understand this, but there's so many ways to learn, which we all know by now, but there's so many ways to learn. So I think that for me, I knew if I could come up with 15 minutes to talk about this, I knew that I obviously knew something. Oh, sorry, I'm reading Ruby's comment. At the Grammys during Megan Thee Stallion song, WAP, they censored words like hard and wet, which obviously aren't inappropriate, but in that context, they were viewed that way. I think this really shames any sort of sexualization of women and their bodies. Personally, made me mad. I agree. I completely agree, because we all have sex. That's just the truth. And the fact that it becomes taboo on the radio or anything like that is sad, and it needs to be normalized.
Next, the person.
But yeah. Oh, did someone have a question?
Morgan, did you have a question?
Sorry, I thought I heard someone
Yeah.
speaking. But yeah, I hope that answered your question before I got distracted.
It did. I think it definitely, it's important to hear that, because a lot of the times we just don't speak up.
Yeah.
And partly it's understood because you've been speaking up for so long that you're tired of it, And the other part is you don't know whether, when you hear the questions back, you have what it takes to back up what you're saying. But at the end of the day, if somebody is explicitly saying something that you believe is wrong, it's important to have a conversation. It doesn't have to be a calling out.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that you decided to shake that off and then step up and then deliver the speech, because as we had this conversation, throughout this year, I've seen how much this talk has developed, not just in content but in confidence, and with each version that you presented, it just seemed to be more yours than a safe way to explain a thought that you shared that already existed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the people watching at home know that I don't really like to explain things in a safe way. I'm not really, I don't like to sugarcoat things. And if I believe in something, then I like to say it. This was a particularly different situation because TED is obviously such a well-known platform. It wasn't just like my dad or like my friend's boyfriend or some stranger I know by like 3 degrees. This is, going on the internet. So that kind of question of credibility really was a question I don't normally ask, but I definitely had to ask myself here.
I have a question that I want to ask. I think I thought of that when the question came from Morgan, actually. High school is kind of a crucial period when you form that style of conversation that really sticks with you. So given that this is already very culturally ingrained and it's hard to unlearn, how could we go about creating this atmosphere in high school or in this education system in general?
Yeah, I mean, I had fantastic health class in general, and I had some really fantastic teachers. I actually think that one of our teachers in our high school won Teacher of the Year, like in America, and she was one of my teachers. So I had some pretty exceptional teachers who were willing to go above and beyond to have conversations that were maybe a little bit taboo to other school districts or in other states, because I'm in New York. but I think that it comes from the teachers. I mean, that's who's shaping these students. So adding into the curriculum, even if it's in health class or when we're talking in a history class and we're talking about the feminist movement, or any impactful woman, outside of just, the feminist movement in general, any woman who has made a difference in this world, talking about them and not hiding them, not just leaving it as, somebody who we like to look at as good, because that plays a role too, right? Like we won't talk about a woman who we might see as like dirty or as a whore or as a bitch or a nasty woman or something like that. We hide history all over the place in America. And I think that it comes down to, rewriting curriculums and having teachers who have no choice but to say, like, if this is your pussy, if you're a woman, like, you have a pussy. Like, we do not have to be afraid to call it that. But you should be afraid if somebody's using it negatively. Like the word bitch, I've had kids in my class who call teachers bitches all the time, which is horrible because teachers are not bitches. They're just teachers trying to teach you, which we know now as, adults. But, having administration and teachers, I think, having to teach these things is really the only thing I think that can make a real difference, is harassing the education system.
I have another question, if there are no questions in the chat. I think this emotion was hinted at during the speech. It's this fatigue towards feminism that exists right now in the society whenever the topic's brought up. And I think you wanted to name the talk to emote that as well. How could we get past that? Does it help to change the word? Does it help to actively teach people what it means and then stick with the word? There are a lot of debates going on. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that we should get rid of the word feminism at all. I think that it's definitely more helpful to reiterate to people all of the time that feminism just means gender equality. People will argue, well, we're all equal. This is America. Equality exists. But it doesn't. I mean, it's clear we have this talk, we have the gender pay wage gap. I mean, there are multiple ways to measure inequality in this country. I think the people who argue you the most are the people who don't want to hear what you have to say. So I think just reiterating to them that it is gender equality. And I mean, it's tough. I go back and forth all the time because people will say, like, think about your wife or your daughter or your cousin or your aunt or something like that. But it really shouldn't matter if you have a personal attachment to a female or a female identifying person or a person with a vagina to want to treat them equally and fair. So it's hard, I think, sticking to the, this is feminism. And if you have more questions, I'm happy to talk about it. Or like, I have this really great education tool. Like, you should check this out. Yes, Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay talks about how the word feminism has been warped by new definitions of feminism. Yeah, that's a great book also. There's lots of great, content out there. I'm a poet, so I love like Olivia Gatwood, and I'm trying to think now. Of course, I can't remember anybody, but she's one of my favorites. Olivia Gatwood's a feminist poet who, she kills it. She's so good. Everybody should watch her. Yeah. People are afraid to call it. Sorry, Ruby wrote that it made me reclaim the word feminism and not to be afraid to call myself one. I've seen women who are like, I'm not a feminist. Because it's a scary word. People hate the word feminism. They're afraid of it.
Yeah, and the battles are harder in other parts of the world on this topic as well. It's like a few years behind.
Even outside of where, Boston, UMass, New York, this conversation is way more taboo outside of, where we're from too. So it's hard and it's emotionally exhausting. You mentioned that fatigue, and I don't think the fatigue is ever really going to go away, to be honest. For as long as we have to have the fight, I don't think that fatigue goes away.
You really are awesome. Thank you so much for this TED Talk. If anyone else has any any more questions, we can ask that, or we'll have to wrap it up and move on to the next TED Talk we have. It's been a great pleasure and privilege working with you, Juliana. I had a great time working with you on the speech.
You too,
Brainstorming
actually.
sessions with you really made me think about so many things in life, and I'm going to take a lot of lessons from it. And I hope the world will too once they see your TED Talk.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. The link for
Bye.
the next live stream is in the chat.
My name is Nalima, and I'm a speakership curator here at TEDx Amherst. Our next speaker is Aaron Baker, a professor of industrial engineering and operations research at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, as well as the director of faculty diversity at the College of Engineering. She is the director of the Wind Energy Fellows, a follow-on from the NSF-funded IGER, Offshore Wind Energy Engineering, Environmental Impacts, and Policy. Additionally, she is the faculty director of the Energy Transition Institute, which is focused on stakeholder-engaged research at the intersection of energy and technology. Erin has a PhD in engineering, economic systems, and operations research from Stanford University, as well as a BA in mathematics from UC Berkeley. Her research is in decision-making under uncertainty, applied to the field of energy and the environment, with a focus on energy justice and publicly funded energy technology, research and development portfolios in the face of climate change. Her work appears in leading academic journals including Science, Nature Energy, Operations Research, and Climate Change. Here to tell you more about her research is Aaron Baker.
Living in northern Ghana is what made climate change real to me. I could see desertification happening in the 2.5 years I lived there. And I experienced firsthand energy inequity. The northern part of Ghana is much poorer and more rural than the south. The capital of Ghana, Accra, got electricity in 1965. My town, Tumu, was connected to the grid in 1994, about 1.5 years into my time there. Seeing the effect of climate change and energy inequity on the people I lived with is one of the reasons I went on to study ways to slow down the human impact on climate. We have to address climate change, and we have to do it in a way that works for marginalized communities. The current energy system is inequitable, not just overseas, but here in the US. The energy system is racist. Pollution from fossil fuels is much worse in low-income areas, and worse still in communities of color, even accounting for income and wealth. Look at Jersey City, home of the highly polluting Hudson Power Plant, which was finally closed in 2017. The people that live near the plant are exposed to the pollution and the toxics. They have an average income that's about the same as the whole city. But they are 75% people of color, compared to 50% for the city and 33% for the whole state. This kind of siting is pernicious. The energy system is regressive. Low-income people pay huge amount of their paychecks for energy bills. In fact, they often pay more due to low-quality housing stock with low energy efficiency. Think about mobile homes. They house 17 million people with a median household income of $30,000. They pay twice as much per square foot as stick-built homes. COVID has made these inequities even worse. In a recent survey of people who are at twice the poverty line, so these are working class people, they found that 17% couldn't pay their energy bills, and 20% had to skip key household needs like food and medicine in order to do so. While this is bad, breaking down the data reveals it's even worse. 33% of Hispanic households and 20% of Black households couldn't pay their energy bills, compared to just 12% of white households. But we are facing a radical transformation of the energy system. In order to address climate change, we need to move to a system that's net zero carbon, and we need to do it pretty quickly. This is a massive challenge. It can be hard to get our heads around the scale of this. Imagine building a full-size 1 gigawatt nuclear power plant every single week. This would get us half the carbon-free energy we need by 2040. But building more generation is only part of the problem. We need to reimagine the electricity system so we can get power when we need it, like when we flip on a light switch. Many of the low-carbon options have challenges. Nuclear power has very little flexibility to turn on or off. Wind and solar work when the wind is blowing or the sun is shining. So building all this new generation and making it work for us means that the energy system of the future is going to look very different than today. The question is, will we move toward a system that is more just and equitable? When I lived in Ghana, I had a chance to travel around Africa, and I ended up on a canoeing trip on the Zambezi River in Zimbabwe. I'll always remember the guide's instructions to us. First, don't trail your hand in the water unless you want it bitten off by a crocodile. Second, beware of hippos. Now, you're too small to bother them, but they don't like the boats. So if you're facing an angry hippo, jump out of the boat and into the water to face the hungry crocodiles. Neither of these options seemed very good. Climate change and energy transition can feel like this sometime. We need to change our energy system, but no solution is perfect. Consider solar energy. Solar generates pollution-free energy just from sunlight. All right, how cool is that? Because of that, many states, including Massachusetts, provide subsidies to households to install solar. Every ratepayer in the state pays into this fund, but the subsidies don't go to everyone equally. They go to people who can afford the upfront costs, and maybe more importantly, they go to people who own roofs and who aren't in the shadow of urban buildings. These kind of policies increase the energy burden of the low income while benefiting the upper middle class and wealthy. It's a kind of reverse Robin Hood, taking from the poor and giving to the rich. So, I ask again, will we move toward a more just and equitable energy system? Not unless we're vigilant and intentional. Now, some of this is the technology. Solar needs a sunny place to sit. Some of it is policy and regulation, the rules that determine how our energy bills interact with solar. Now, there are some innovative approaches to righting wrongs like this. Blue Hub Capital, a community development financial institution, is coming up with ways for low-income urban dwellers to treat off-site solar as if it were on their roofs. And they're coming up with clever financing mechanisms that benefit the tenants at the same time as the wealthy investors. This is a great start, and it shows the value of innovative thinking. Consider pollution. Springfield, Massachusetts, which is just a few miles down the road from here, is about 70% Black or Hispanic and has 25% of the population living under the poverty line. Okay? It's been called the asthma capital of the United States. And yet, there's talk about siting a biomass plant here. Now, it's controversial whether this biomass plant will reduce greenhouse gas emissions or not. But it's very likely that biomass will play a role in our fight against climate change. So we need to think about where we site these plants. Is it fair to site this polluting plant in an area that's already racked by pollution? Or put another way, can we address climate change and help communities like Springfield at the same time? There may be technological solutions. There's some emerging technologies that can capture greenhouse gas emissions and all the other pollutants before they go up into the air. But adding technologies like this add a lot of cost, so questions need to be asked. When it comes to equity, we need to think, who asks and who answers? Whose questions get listened to? Usually, it's the entitled and the empowered. Politicians, bureaucrats, business owners, and people much like me, white, relatively wealthy. We feel entitled to ask questions. We can be squeaky wheels who don't get called angry every time they ask a leading question or question power. And whose answers get listened to? Experts, which is good. We need scientists and we need social scientists. We don't want to make decisions based on hunches or spin. But we often ignore some of our experts, those people who know the building, who know the community, who have on-the-ground experience. The Dakota Access Pipeline is an example where indigenous knowledge around stewardship of the land and water was ignored. My research has mostly been looking at energy technologies that can help us solve climate change. My motivation has always been social justice. It's clear that climate change is going to have the worst impacts on the poor and the marginalized. And climate change policy, if it's not smart, can hurt those same groups. But I was feeling that equity was not centered enough in my research. So along with some colleagues who were feeling the same way, we started the Energy Transition Institute at UMass Amherst. Our focus is stakeholder-engaged research and education at the intersection of energy technology and social equity. We've been experimenting with community-engaged co-design of energy solutions. Community-engaged co-design is a concept that's been used by planners recently to plan infrastructure. But applying it to the energy system adds layers of complexity because the energy system, and especially the electricity system, is very complicated. For example, when California restructured their electricity system in the early 2000s, the economists and politicians didn't talk to the engineers, and they had some pretty serious errors about how the electricity system works. That led to rolling blackouts and price spikes of $1,400 for what should have been $45. The challenge we face now is even greater than what California faced then. We are speeding to develop all kinds of new technologies to address climate change, and we're restructuring our electricity system so we can incorporate those technologies. One thing is clear. It's not enough to develop cool new cutting-edge technologies. There's no reason to think they will make things more equitable. And it's not enough to develop policies and regulations around today's technologies and today's energy system. We know the system is going to look different in the future. We must innovate at the intersection of energy technology and policy, and do it with the full involvement of the marginalized communities who are most affected. So back on the Zambezi River, after spending the first half of the day partnered with the guide, I had to switch canoes and partner with a mere mortal. And sure enough, we ended up facing an angry hippo with the current taking us right toward it. Now, my partner and I were not very coordinated, and we were very tired by that time of the trip. But instead of jumping in the water and taking our chances with the crocodile, we managed to focus, work together, and paddle out of harm's way. This is the challenge that climate change and energy transition leave us. In order to avoid the angry hippo, We must work together, use all of our skills, and listen to all of our people to find ways to work toward a cleaner and more just energy system.
machine learning algorithm can be taught to perform any function whatsoever. And that's why we see it all over the place. This is a big breakthrough that we can do it this generally. Now, that doesn't say that we can do every single scenario like now. We can't do anything we want with it, but we can do basically anything, and we have theoretical proofs that we can do basically anything.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hi, recording.
Sorry, I forgot to start that sooner.
That's all good. Well, they get the gist. They can look at the slide. Yeah. Okay, so this is the basic set of the method. It's important, though, to talk then about how we learn with this method. I did not talk about that at all. The very generic answer to this is with data, or examples in our case. So here's an example of some examples. Imagine we have a bunch of photos of hot dogs and things that are not hot dogs. And we have labels for them, yes, yes, not a hot dog, yes. And with this example, what we'd be able to do is we'd be able to look at this and say, these images are hot dogs, and the machine learning algorithm would learn that images like this are hot dogs, and images that are like this are not hot dogs. And this is a sort of cute little trivial example where we're looking at images of hot dogs. Actually, image classification like this is actually not all that easy, but it is one that's very easy for me to talk about. The thing is that there can be like much different data. We can use basically any data we want, as long as we have any sort of label or any sort of like association with some label for our data. And people use basically all data that we have. And this might collapse your worldview a little bit, but this reason right here, the fact that we can take this data and we can teach our algorithm to take this image and associate it with this output, and associating is a bit of a is a bit of a weak thing to say, but it gets the idea across. This is basically why we collect data, is to do this. So you can imagine we can take, a different encoding of you as a person, all your browsing habits, all your likes, all your dislikes, and it can give us a prediction of what sorts of advertisements would be effective on you, or what sorts of products you're likely to buy. So you can see a very obvious case there. And in a more nefarious case, we can actually look at how we could take the same sort of information and look at what sort of propaganda would work on you. That was actually a big thing in the 2016 election, being apolitical about it, but it was a big thing that some people were accused of doing that. And there is evidence to say that they did do it. I'll talk about that a little bit more later when we get to a different segment of this. But you can imagine any data we want, and this is why we want data. And when people say we use data for AI, this is what they mean. All right. So there is a little bit of an issue with all of this, though. And you may have already picked up on it, but let's look into it. So we have our model, which I have just sort of abstractly defined as this box that does something. And let's look at an example of what that might actually look like. So here's what a neural network looks like. This is how I draw them for demonstration. This is a pretty regular way to draw them. And the way that I'm going to describe this to you, because I don't necessarily know the CS background of everyone, is that each of these dots or these nodes here are going to represent some number, and each of these, I guess each of these lines really represent a number, but you can say each of them represent a number, and we're doing some series of multiplication and additions to get from the input to the output. And essentially, it is just doing some function using these numbers. And the way that we get these numbers is that we're going to learn them automatically through the data. So we're going to take out all of our data, and we're going to associate them. And what we do when we're associating them is we're learning which numbers best correlate the inputs to the outputs. This is the basic idea of how machine learning works. There's actually a very clever way that we do it called gradient descent, if you've heard about that. But I won't go through describing that right now. Just know it's very clever. I recommend you look up gradient descent online at some point and just figure out what it is, because it's very clever. But we essentially have a method where we can mathematically prove that we can come up with good numbers for this sort of situation, for any sort of data that we want. Now, the problem with this is we are making a decision with our machine learning model. We're deciding whether something's a hot dog or not. And when we actually go to look at the model, it is just numbers being multiplied and added together. And the problem is that we can't interpret this. It is just numbers. It is just doing operations. We can't look at this model and say, okay, we're looking at faces and we can see right here, oh, if it sees a black person's face, it might react differently. There's no way for us to see that. It is a black box. That's the actual term in CS, meaning that we can't decipher what's going on inside. It just does something. And this is sort of the core issue, the core modern issue with machine learning, is that we can't create models that are interpretable. We just don't have the methods to do it reliably. So we end up with these black boxes that we use everywhere. If you have heard of a machine learning model being used somewhere, like Google Homes or your phone, the autocorrect, whatever, all of them are black box models. So it's a little bit scary like that, where in a very real way, we don't actually know what's going on inside of it. We don't know how it's making decisions. We don't know how it's thinking. And that should scare you a little bit. It scares me a little bit. But this is much more where the actual issue lies. So here I have, the next segment is, can we trust how well it works? And this is a video that I'm going to play describing how well it does work. Someone asked a question. I've noticed the CAPTCHA images, the ones that you have to do to prove you're human, are getting increasingly hard. What's going to happen when the inconvenience gets high? So I assume you mean the inconvenience for us to actually fill out CAPTCHAs. Well, it is, so in case some of you don't know, what CAPTCHAs are really doing, they aren't really there to prove that you're human, although it is a method for us to do that. What they really are is they're collecting data for machine learning models. One way that you can really justify this for yourself is that one of the biggest modern tasks that need a lot of data is self-driving cars. So think to yourself what you've seen in CAPTCHAs, and you've almost definitely seen image classification of street signs or cars or all of that, and you've seen that they've gotten increasingly difficult because they need more robust data sets. I would assume that CAPTCHAs are probably, they can get pretty difficult, and I think the inconvenience is still such a low bar that people can still do it. I'd say most likely CAPTCHA tasks are going to change though, as self-driving cars, they have all that data that they've collected still. So most likely it will actually transform into a different task. There are plenty of good tasks to do, like writing. We could give you a blurb of text, and you could say whether it's like a human or how emotional it sounds or whatever. There's a lot of different tasks that we could do. Yeah, I'll answer more questions in the Q&A after too. All right. Can we trust how well it works? The very nice truth about it is that AI works really, 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 really extraordinarily well. This is why ML works incredibly well, and this is why we use it. I mean, it is not a coincidence that we have a mathematical proof to prove that we will get good performance, and then we get good performance. But it is still surprisingly good. I want you all to imagine back in the day when we first beat chess with a robot, right? So that was in 1997, and it has been 24 years since then, and computers have gotten faster and better, and machine learning methods have gotten better very quickly. So I want to show you a little bit where the cutting edge is of machine learning models. So I have a little video here for you. This is AI learning how to play a game called Dota 2. This is considered one of the hardest tasks that AI have done to date. And it is a complicated strategy game. And you'll see a little bit of it, but they basically just talk about how it's a good proof that AI can do a lot of stuff. All right. Actually, I think I should change it so that the sharing is for video. 1 second. There you go.
OpenAI's goal is to build safe artificial general intelligence. We know that AI can be extremely beneficial to humanity, and it's going to require fundamental advances to see what it's really capable of. Dota is a great testbed for artificial intelligence. It's a very complicated game with a large competitive scene. And what this means is that you have to develop new techniques. You have to push forward the boundary of what's possible in order to get anywhere. For this project, we're building a Dota player. We're starting with a bot capable of beating top professional players at Dota 1v1. The rules of Dota are so complicated that if you just think really hard about how the game works and you try to write those rules down, you're not even going to be able to reach the performance of a reasonable player. So our bot is trained entirely through self-play. It starts out completely random with no knowledge of the world and simply plays against a copy of itself, which means it always has an evenly matched opponent. And it climbs this ladder of skill level until it's able to reach the performance of the best professional players in the world. The International is Dota's World Championships. 20,000 fans come from around the world to watch professionals compete for a $24 million prize pool. Over the course of the International, we tested our bot against a number of professional players. It turns out that our AI has learned really robust skills in the game that is actually really competitive with these pros. Many of the pros wanted to keep playing the bot and started talking about using it as part of their training routine.
Oh, sorry. So I cut off the video there. Basically, the rest of it is them talking about how the pros say that it is as good as a pro, and it is definitely as good as a pro. Now, this video here is from, I think, 2016, 2017, and the very next year, they were able to not only make a single bot that was comparable to a professional player, but they made an entire team of bots that was better than professional teams. So the advance of AI is very, very quick. And we're starting to see superhuman performance in tasks that people think should not be able to be done by AI. And that is happening basically every single year. And if you were to watch a video of this bot playing, it is extraordinary. It thinks in ways that humans don't, and it does things that humans don't, and it plays better. And it isn't just, like being able to move quickly, being able to like make decisions quickly even. It makes better decisions in the same way that, you need to make good decisions in chess, they do in this as well. So it is extremely impressive. And this is a thing that will probably be looked back on in history books because it was so impressive. It was such a landmark for AI. Sorry. So next up, I want to do a little bit of a test where we test you guys versus AI. All right. So I want you to look at these faces, and I want you to tell me if you recognize any of them. If you think you recognize one of these people, raise your hand or something. All right. Well, that's comforting. That's comforting because, in fact, none of these people are real. I'm sure you've all sort of seen this sort of floated around that we can generate fake faces and stuff. But I think people really do not appreciate, one, how good the end result is. These definitely look like real people. They definitely look like they are celebrities, too. This is particularly trying to generate fake celebrities. And one other thing that people don't appreciate is how much better this has gotten in the past 5 years. 5 years ago, you could have seen these photos and they would have looked like weird blobs, or they're missing bits of their hair, or their faces sort of got different expressions going on. And now you look at them and they look genuinely real. And to think about the fact that we are taking, what the machine learning model is doing is taking just a database of faces and is coming up with new examples out of it, should be extraordinary to you. That is something that is a very difficult thing to do. If you sit down and you try to do that by hand, or you try to do that even just like thinking about it, that is extraordinarily hard. But we're able to do it, and even fairly easily. If you wanted to, today, you could download the tools necessary to do this. So that's sort of where AI is at now. And I hope with that, you can maybe get a little bit of confidence for the fact that AI is actually, or machine learning is actually very powerful these days. A lot of people like to, one topic in particular that comes up a lot is self-driving cars. This will be my opinion on the issue, I guess. But the reality of it is people are scared of it, like, oh, machine learning can't drive better than I can, AI is just a computer. How can it do all this? And the reality of it is that machine learning can very easily drive better than you. And in fact, it does empirically drive better than humans across the board. People then have the problem, though, where we look at a couple cases of the AI crashing and we say, is it worth it to have to deal with the consequences of an AI crashing? What does it mean when an AI crashes? Even though it crashes like 1/1 millionth as often as a human does, what does that mean? Like, who's to blame, and etc. So my personal opinion is that people, should accept the fact that AI is not bad at driving. They just have a real problem with AI crashing at all. It's impossible to get 100% performance, and that is more what people have problem with than, AI actually being worse than people. AI is, if we pick a particular task and define it well, AI will perform better than humans. That's just become the reality of the situation in basically everything. Over time, eventually. Yeah. Okay. So part 3 is, can we trust how it's used? And I sort of hinted at this earlier, but the tools are completely available to everyone to do this. In fact, if you'd like to, I use the tool PyTorch. You can go on your other tab and you can install PyTorch right now in about 10 minutes, and then you would be able to use it. And people definitely do use it. In fact, it is one of the most downloaded tools, and amateur like AI creators definitely create this. Data sets are widely available, and you can basically use it for anything. What I was hinting at earlier was so the big scandal was that we were seeing that there were Russian bots that were trying to promote propaganda. But the scary thing was not that they were posting messages like, wow, we should really love Russia, da da da. It's nothing that see-through and that asinine. What they really do, and the really scariest sentence I can say, is that they were making propaganda memes. So they were making things that were funny, were intelligent, were totally Turing passable, meaning that humans couldn't tell it was developed by a bot, and they were in fact convincing people. There was research done on whether or not they were convincing, and they absolutely were. So we need to also worry about not only individual people doing this sort of thing, which they still can do, but also nations doing this. And of course, the tools are all available to every nation in the world, of course. There is also domestic use that has been pretty bad. I'll give you an example of sort of local use here. There was a case where there was a US court that tried to use machine learning model to assist in sentencing. So they would use the model and predict off of all their criminal data whether the person who was being persecuted, what sentencing should be expected, right? And they would use that as their benchmark for how long they did sentence the person. And to very little surprise from some communities, the model was sentencing Black people more harshly for exactly the same crimes than it was white people. And this is, kind of not a surprise if you think about it. I mean, if we look at the data, this is something that does happen in the real world. And so in the data, we see that Black people are punished more harshly. Now, the thing that I want to talk about this is not necessarily that this is a bad idea. This is a bad idea to use it in this sort of context. And there's a lot of problems with using it in sort of serious context like this. But what I want to talk about is the response to this. And some people like to say, why don't we just make it not racist? And that is a, very, comfortable thing to say. That is a very natural reaction. Okay, why don't we just, unbias it? Why don't we just get rid of that behavior? We created this AI. Why do we have to let it keep doing this? We'll just change it. And that comment pretty much exclusively comes from people who do not do AI. And let me talk about why this sentence is a problem. So let's talk about what we're doing when we're optimizing, and let's talk about objectivity. So when we are optimizing a machine learning model to perform a task, what we're really doing is we're defining some objective function. In the case of our last task, that would be minimizing the distance between the outputted sentencing prediction and the actual sentencing that took place. So we just want to minimize that. We want to minimize the difference between those two things. That would be the very generic objective function that we're using. This is what we're actually doing, is we're either minimizing or maximizing some function. All right. So next, you might want to say, okay, well, let's maximize this while minimizing how racist it is, right? The problem is that saying minimizes racism or minimizes like racial bias or any of these things has a lot of different meanings. And you could mean that you want to have the same average sentencing for Black people as white people. You might mean that for very similar cases, you want to have very similar outcomes for the different races. There's a lot of different things you can mean by this, and all of them can be good intention. You can say, I want to have, that second one sounds pretty good, right? We want to have that for the same input, independent of race, we get the same output, right? I think that soon. And the problem is that when we have multiple different ideas like this, they are usually impossible to optimize at the same time. So we need to pick one. And not only that, it does interfere with the actual behavior that we want originally. So the being similar to the actual sentencing that we expect from the data, to minimize racism does actually sort of get rid of that. And one example in this that may convince you that this is actually a problem is, say we want to make the average between the two races the same. What you'd actually end up doing is over-sentencing white people. Not that you are over-sentencing them relative to their thing, but for the same crime, you would end up sentencing them more. So we'd have been a case where we'd have multiple ideas of what is fair, but a lot of people think that they overlap and we just need to pick the thing that optimizes all of them. But in reality, a lot of times they're disparate, and optimizing one necessarily means not optimizing the other. So to finish up, can we trust AI? So fundamentally, we do not have AIs that are interpretable. This is a problem, and this means that we cannot trust that AIs will behave predictably in all cases, just fundamentally. Second, they do learn the behavior that we tell them, and they do it very well. So if we define a behavior and we tell the AI to learn that behavior, it will learn that behavior. The problem being there that humans are the ones who define that behavior, and even if humans were much smarter than we are, that is still a difficult problem, one that we might not be able to actually ever solve. So the real answer to this question is, should we be scared of AIs taking over the world and approaching the singularity and all these things that are terrible and awful, and you hear about on the news, and you hear about AI researchers are scared about this? Not really, not yet at least. It's a far off problem. What you should absolutely be worried about are laws and regulations about AI. My personal opinion on the issue is that we should look to form an international committee to look at these AIs and make sure that we do them correctly. There's more feelings I have about that, but I think that'll wrap up the talk. Thanks. We do a Q&A now.
Thank you so much, Cooper.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yes.
I cut you off. You were saying.
Oh, good. I would say there's a lot I did not say about AI there and about ML. Don't think that is the entire story, but it's just a little bit to get you thinking. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Cooper. This has been really awesome. I'm sure a lot of people here have heard the terms AI and machine learning a million times, but had very little context of what it is, because it is a very complex topic. And like you said before, you can't cover it in 20 minutes. So we'll definitely have to have these conversations again in the future. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate everyone who was here and listening in. You can tune back into the YouTube live stream. I'll drop the link in the chat to see the next TED Talk, and we'll be doing a speaker Q&A after that. Thank you so much for coming. There's the link.
Sonita, and I'm a speakership curator at TEDx Amherst. Kavya is the co-founder of the Society of Women Coders, a women-led organization that works to encourage young girls from developing nations to opt for education and careers in STEM by conducting free coding and entrepreneurship camps and providing mentorship. She also works as a senior analyst at SiriusXM in New York. Through Society of Women Coders, she has worked with government agencies and civic organizations in Haiti, Kenya, Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, and Belize to establish coding camps and has personally taught at several of them. She's also involved with Code in Place initiative at Stanford University as a section leader. She's an advocate of women education in the developing world. Kavya's talk is about how girls could have wings made of code. Ladies and gentlemen, Kavya Krishna.
I'm Medina. I'm 16 years old and I live in Kabul, Afghanistan. When you first hear Afghanistan, what comes to mind? Probably bombings, war, and crime. Girls are not allowed to go out much here in Kabul, but I want everyone to see my country. See it beyond the chaos. See it for the people, the culture, and the hospitality. I'm also Hilda, a 14-year-old from Belize City. I got shot in my right leg a couple years ago during one of many gang wars here in Belize City. Men in my community have been to prison, but they are not bad people. I want to help, train, and counsel prisoners here in Belize after they return home. I'm also Deandra from Jamaica. Jamaica is the land of wood and water, and I want to preserve that distinction. I want to raise awareness of the plight of these marine animals that live in our waters. I want to save them. Don't forget my names. I am Medina, I am Hilda, I am Deandra. But today, I am Kavya Krishna, representing the voices of over 130 million other young girls like me around the world that have goals and dare to dream. I'm a financially independent woman, originally from a developing country, who knows how to code. And in my mind, that is the most prepared state of being for the future, for girls and women like me. Note, keyword that makes the state of being slightly difficult is women. And another that makes it even more difficult is developing country. In 2019, I spent a week teaching coding through Society of Women Coders through these high school girls in Belize City. And this is where I first met Aisha. Just like Deandra, Hilda, and Medina, Aisha came into the camp with no understanding of coding or entrepreneurship. During the camp, she built a website to represent her entrepreneurial project. Through her project, Aisha wanted to solve the issue of sargassum pollution in the Caribbean Ocean. For those of you who don't know, sargassum seaweed crisis continues to affect life on the Caribbean coasts. What happens is the sargassum begins to rot at the coasts and accumulates, which disrupts life both inside and outside the ocean. Aisha wanted to clean the coasts of this sargassum and make usable products like furniture and fertilizer out of it. She not only came up with this idea, but she came up with a whole business prototype of how she will collect it, utilize it, and set up a community selling service. She even incorporated forms for volunteer sign-up in her website, all in a week's time from scratch. Hilda was part of the same camp, and her project was an online portal for prisoner counseling. Medina built a website to promote tourism in Afghanistan in our virtual camp last year. And Deandra built a project to preserve marine life in Jamaica during our climate hackathon this year. So what I want you guys to pay attention to here today is that these teenage girls from all around the world have the aspiration to solve some of the greatest issues of our world: economic development, climate change, criminal rehabilitation, and war. And they saw an opportunity through these camps and made use of the platform to gather the required technical skills in order to take that first step towards solving something that affects them. Reason being that their survival and happiness is entangled around these regional issues that make for the bigger global problems. Opportunities like these camps are rare in these communities, but are exactly what is needed to foster sustainable solutions to our global problems. With skills like coding, girls can be steered to solve local issues, to make money, and to change status quo. 3 years ago, we started Society of Women Coders to create an army of such girls around the world. And we have directly impacted over 1,200 girls in 27 developing countries all around the world by introducing them to just two things: coding and social entrepreneurship. A survey done by the World Economic Forum suggests that 42% of the core job skills required today will change substantially in the coming years. Pushing more women towards learning digital skills is the best way to ensure their financial security and independence in the future, and especially in underdeveloped and developing countries. The fight of the future is not going to be about Excel sheets or PowerPoints. It's going to be about not becoming obsolete. And to stay relevant, we need our girls updated on the most lucrative skills of our time: coding and financial literacy. So the goal is to help more women attain financial independence in the coming years, and efficiently so, with education, career, and jobs in technology. Let's talk about financial independence. How many here think that financial independence makes for happier women? To me, that sounds like a fact. But to back it up, there is research and studies that show that a direct connection can be drawn between the economic dependency of the women on the men of the household and the victims of mental abuse and domestic violence. Financially independent women are less likely to fall victim to mental abuse and domestic violence. Financial independence helps women to be more confident, free-willed, and better leaders, which not only makes them happier, but leads to happier families and a more wholesome life. So I know I threw a lot of information at you all here today. Keywords: future, women, tech, developing countries, financial independence, happiness. I would like to point out that there is a gap between how we perceive happy women and what science and surveys point out. Humans have been able to imagine a society on Mars and send a Tesla in space. But the notion of equality here on Earth is still strange to most. So we have to prepare our girls. We need our Madinas to know that they are equipped with the coding skills required to build an app for tourism in Afghanistan, and even build a business around it in the future when they grow up. We need our Hildas to know that training and mentoring prisoners can be done through a socially funded venture that will not only employ her, but allow her to create employment for more girls like her in Belize. We need our Deandras to be confident enough to start their own nonprofit organization and save the wildlife around the world. We need our girls to know that they are capable and ready. Society of Women Coders aims to create opportunities for young women through technical training and mentorship. And more importantly, change perceptions in the communities that need it the most. Teaching young girls early on that they do not need a fairy godmother to help them fly. They can make their own wings made of code. Thank you.
the role that coding plays right now in schools. My personal thought is that it's going to become a basic course that everybody will be studying in the future. There is no way out of it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was thinking a similar question of should it be taught in K through 12 as its own course, or should it be a skill that's applied in the other classes? Right, like when you're learning math, you can learn some coding, or social studies, you get to see the impact of technology. So I don't know if I have an answer on that, but that was one of the questions that watching her speak made me think about.
Mm-hmm. I thought I'm studying I just graduated. A master's. Another friend who's pursuing bio in PhD wanted help with coding. It's really pervasive, the nature and the help that coding provides. So it's definitely going to be a staple in a lot of courses. I think at least two other people in this call are computer scientists. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally will talk about it. Hey Brian, how's it going?
Hey Ruby, good.
So glad you could be here. This is awesome. Yeah, I really like what you just said about, to piggyback off of what you just said, I really like what you just said about how it could either be taught as its own course or it could be taught in tandem with other courses, incorporated in certain ways. I think that's really interesting because then you use that application of it. Because I think oftentimes that's where academia lacks, is when it doesn't have the clear application. Like when you're learning discrete math and you're like, wow, I really don't know what I'd use this for, unless you're doing something very specific with it. So using, learning R in like an econ class or I think makes a lot of sense. But I'm very curious to see how it changes in the next like 5 or so years, like with younger family members of mine, like younger cousins and stuff, who are going through elementary school, and whether or not they'll have exposure to learning code. And I think it's one thing that I've noticed, and for I think everyone here knows that I study computer science. I will say that there's like a huge array in pre-existing knowledge of computer science when you enter the comp sci college at UMass, or any college for that matter. You have a range of people who've never coded in their life and just like are good at math, and they think that it seems pretty interesting. And then you have people who have been coding since they were in middle school and have been doing camps and have taken APs, and you have this like intense range. And I think that's like one of the biggest reasons why it's so different from any other subject matter, is because math has this history of how we've taught it, what we've taught, the like typical tracks, and it's pretty consistent throughout, like at least the United States, like what you learn throughout high school and then college or even middle school and stuff. Whereas computer science, it's kind of just like a crapshoot. I like to ask people, what is your previous experience with it, and how has that impacted your education? Because I notice like a very big disconnect.
It's weird that it's like computer science is both knowledge and a skill, right? And so I think what you're pointing out is a lot of them come highly skilled in it. Versus like biology, you wouldn't say like I'm skilled in biology because I took AP biology, right? You're knowledgeable about it, but I think that's what creates a lot of the awkwardness of the disparity, right? When you come into a program like this.
Has anybody here felt like the hands are tied because they didn't know how to code? I think that's part of the reason why it's becoming a skill. It's no longer an option of making it more comfortable. It's more about the ability to do it, which is becoming more and more in demand. It's really weird how that transition happened, but it's also very understandable, just because of the nature of the whole field.
Yep.
And you even have like coding versus computing, right? So like when I think of coding, for me, it's so much easier to appreciate the visual aspects of it when you're doing app dev or web dev or something like that, where you can see it versus computing back to like R. I could do the math in theory, but someone who can compute it can do it much faster and better and with a lot more data than me. So it's almost like you don't know what you don't know too. And then you see someone else do it in a more efficient way and you're like, whoa, how did you do that?
Taking it out of the academic sphere, something that I personally felt about this concept called computer science was that it's about the way you think. Looking at a problem, dissecting it, trying to brainstorm what are the tangible steps to reach the end goal. And that has been very cross applicational in my other parts of life. It's made me more analytical. It's made me more useful as a human being in problematic situations. And can others speak to this experience? Is it something very common?
I guess I can also apply the same thing for like math. At the end of the day, a lot of people say, mostly researchers, you know, they would be like, okay, CS is mostly discrete math. So the whole idea of problem solving just comes down from um, the basics of discrete math that we try to solve, and the way we are trying to find like smaller problems out of a bigger problem, and then how we dissect and divide them, divide and conquer methods, and then we try to solve the smaller ones first, and then we get to the bigger one. So yeah, I think it's not just math or CS that we see these skills applicable. We can also apply these in other spheres of our lives.
And it's definitely funny because the other day, someone asked me what languages I speak, and my first answer was Java, Python, and it's like, no, 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 conversational languages. It's it's coming in. It's taken over my life at this point.
But it's interesting, you can go through high school and you can take French and Latin and Spanish and stuff, but like it's not like, and you can take R and Python and you're right. I mean, that's not a thing, but should it be a thing? And even if you wanted to make it a thing now, you have the problem of who's going to teach it, right? I guess it goes back to my question there. It's nice to say you're going to teach coding in biology, but that biology teacher needs to be trained to be able to teach that, or needs someone else to come in and help with that part of it.
And it's always that first lesson in coding that's important, that first language that you're learning. Because once you get that straight, it's pretty easy to teach yourself other things. At least in my major, I was expected to pick up other languages, and there was no mollycoddling happening. And it's the same way I think that that expectation is huge and is relevant, and it's kind of approachable.
I love this guy.
Yeah.
I really want to hear from people who haven't coded what their thoughts are on how it's becoming more and more prominent.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I can go. So I took my first coding class last year, and it was very hard for me because I have an IT minor, and most people in my class have coded in Python or SQL just for fun. And so in class, they just like had programs or experiments that they, not experiments, like just code that they had run for fun. And so it was hard for me to catch up and kind of not just learn a new language, but learn how to learn a language. I think that's like the most fundamental part for a new coder, because you have to think in a very logical way, and it's not logic like regular speaking logic. It's like the logic of a language. It forms the crux of how you learn to absorb this information and then speak to a machine. Because like I would go and I'm just like, why isn't this understanding this? But you have to unlock these specific tools and these words to communicate it to a machine. And that's what makes it so easy but difficult for someone who's just starting off. So like that's been my experience. I don't know if people who have coded before went through this learning curve when they started, because I think it's easier to absorb this at a younger age. So yeah, I'd love to hear people who have done this and know if my experience resonated with them.
I feel like I can relate to that in that this past semester, had a lot of classes that were not CS classes where I had to write essays. And that's something that I don't do very often and haven't done in a while. And it was like a whole new type of language where I was trying to find the right combination of words to get my point across, which is like to some degree similar to like writing a program where you're trying to get the point across to the computer to do certain things. And eventually it became very methodical. I mean, it definitely felt more abstract, like writing an essay where I had so many more options and less rules. But it was still very, very different. I think, like, I don't know, I definitely notice um there's still that parallel of like a nicely written essay is like nicely written code.
Taking it slightly to a different angle, I feel that there is this perception of what coding is and what actually coding is, and that's a very popular meme for what it looks like to code, with a lot of code on a black terminal screen versus just Googling how to write every single line. And that perception is really crippling when you try to start coding. I remember when my friends who were trying to learn coding would come to me and ask me a question, and I would immediately Google the answer for them. He's like, "But I thought you knew." And my answer is like, "This is how we know. This is all there is. You just know what to search for and what snippet to pick out and then put in your code." And that process is not normalized. There's that level of intellectual superiority among coders that exists, demarcating them from non-coders, so that people who don't code seem as if you need to know a lot before you actually do something, whereas everybody here is just learning on the fly and then putting together the pieces.
Yeah, I think that's a big difference between like academic learning and professional learning. Is most of the time when you're out working, right, you're not going to know it, but you need to know how to figure it out, or like who to ask or how to look it up. And so I think teaching people how to code is a great skill that in and of itself, but also in that application to say, it's okay that I don't know the answer to this, but I know that I can figure out the answer to this.
I'm gonna single out my sister because she's on this call right now. Morgan. um, she's in high school, and I'm curious because I don't think I've asked you this before. Has Hamden Academy, a public school in northern Maine, taught anything along the lines of coding in your time there?
Hello. So I'm driving right now, but mom's holding the phone. So in our school, we do a day of code like every year. I don't know if they did it last year, but we definitely did it in middle school and elementary school. And we do have some classes with coding that we can like choose to take in junior year and senior year. But they're not very like educational. Like it's usually a free credit class kind of thing where people just take them to get that credit because the teachers aren't very well versed in coding.
The cool part again is like you can learn it. There's so much online content, and I guess this is what Kavya is probably doing, is connecting in people. As long as you get on the internet, you can learn through videos, through tutorials, through all these different things. But learning from a person, I think, is the better way, whether that's a teacher or just a friend, right? Because you're going to get stuck. And back to the essay thing, you get stuck on an essay, but in a different way than how you get stuck in code. It's way worse, at least, from the limited amount of exposure I've had to it, where nothing works just because of one tiny thing. It's like if you're writing an essay, you had a spelling mistake in the whole essay, you can't see it because, of that spelling mistake, but you don't know where it is because it's not going to underline it for you, kind of thing.
Unless you have a good IDE or the language is working well with you, which is not the case for a lot of them.
Yeah.
I have a question for Sunita. You work with Kavya closely on the talk, right? So how, obviously she told you the stories about the the impact that coding had, particularly on young girls. So do you know what happens after they pick up that skill? Like how does it directly impact them?
So, like, the discussions we have had about the girls who like picked up, skills in those coding camps is, I think it would be some sort of like a short-term boot camp where you get the skills, and then in that camp only you would like have some days to like apply those skills. And some of the girls that she talks about, I don't remember all, but they would apply for like building a website, or like thinking of a problem in the world and then trying to solve it using coding. Like, I think one of the popular ones that I really liked was the sargassum pollution that someone thought of, and even like going forward and making a business out of it. So I think uh, that's where they learn, like, I have the skill with me. Now I can apply it in a way that I can solve problems of the world, and also some things that I could do for myself. Something on those lines, I think. Um, and then again, if usually the girls in those particular areas wouldn't have access to like um, internet or computers all the time. So the team would like have such facilities for them in those camps. And so even later on when they would like go for colleges, or like jobs, they they know that they have these skills that they could apply in the future. So they're just carrying those things with them.
I think it's really interesting to me that, and I read this book pretty recently that I have told probably a number of you about, called Brotopia. The subtitle is Breaking Up the Boys Club of Silicon Valley, and it's all about gender disparities in tech and how it's gotten to where it is today and why. It really, really, the author, she really deep dives on every little aspect of STEM industries, specifically computer science industries, as well as like venture capitalist stuff, and how that's really disproportionately male led, and pretty often sexist. And it's really interesting because she talks a lot about how, um, in the 70s, it was the percentage of women graduating college with degrees in STEM fields were super high. I think even higher than men. And women were the computers, like in Hidden Figures, like the NASA project, and all the women, yeah, they're all the computers, and that was their title, and they were doing heavy math. Um, and then we shift away to this strange difference where now you're shocked if you see a woman in a comp sci class. And just noticing like how much that's changed is super interesting, and something that I've been reading a lot about. So I think like there's a lot of organizations in similar style to Kavya's that are emerging. Girls Who Code, Coding with Clossy, like all of these women-led, women-focused computer science camps that teach young girls not only a skill that they don't necessarily need to learn in an academic setting, but this level of confidence that I think is 10 times more valuable than just a technical skill, because it takes a lot more time to develop. So I thought that was really interesting, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. And so I love how that was obviously really apparent in Kavya's talk about how it's super important not only to teach these young girls and women these technical skills. I mean, they're building a whole website in a week, um, which is great. And then at the end, when she's talking about how it's important to teach them that they are capable, I think that's a really important point that she makes.
To play the devil's advocate here, as much as all the soft skills that come into play when we learn coding, which really empower us, and the access to the financial independence that comes with a STEM degree, what is the trade-off here that we are missing as a society when everybody shifts to coding? What are we losing out on?
We're losing out on that communication, that in-person connection. And it's funny because I notice it in the comp sci college where I think I'm answering this question. But I notice in the comp sci college at UMass just the relative introversion and just like everyone kind of keeps to themselves, and how it's not taboo but not super common to work in teams, and how we're not encouraged to share work with each other. We're actually discouraged to share work with each other. You should never share code because that's cheating. Whereas in industry, in order to create the most impressive and cool things like what Cooper was talking about with like the crazy machine learning models and stuff, you can't build that on your own. You need a team of people and you need to be working together. And so I think the biggest, a very important thing while teaching computer science is teaching how to work together on teams while creating these future technologies. I kind of tangented from your question, but
no, it's definitely relatable. I too in my classes see that level of not just introversion, but that level of apprehension towards connecting with people outside of the space. I'm not sure how big of a con that's going to be, but on a global scale, sometimes I do get the feeling that computer science and coding in general is at a premature phase right now, and it's not really ready to be an acceptable study or field of study, just like math or physics. There's that base set up there, and I somehow feel that base is shaky with comsci. Is that just me, or is that a common thought?
I would like to that I would say like I've seen like more women in CS than in math. Like since CS is like a very trending major for people to do, I would see like more female students in the class for a CS setting, but not for math. So like more of the attention is going towards, CS or tech related fields because there are more opportunities to be doing jobs in the industry, um, or like applied skills that you learn in the classroom than math. So I guess like I've also heard like conferences. Um, I forget the one that happens in like September. Um, some Grace Water conference where
the Grace Hopper.
Grace Hopper, sorry. Yeah, I got to know about it like from my friends, and like it's like a conference where more women are encouraged to go, and then specifically like companies will come and like have the interviews on spot, or like um or networking sessions, stuff like that. So I think definitely CS field is like more growing um, for the woman than math, I would say.
That's really interesting. I guess that's all the time we have here today. Thank you everyone for participating and stepping up to the plate. This has been really fun, and please tune back in. All right.
Join us for networking.
Thank you.
Hello. Once again, my name is Ruby Ramsey, and I'm the Executive Director of TEDx Amherst. TEDx Amherst is an independently organized, student-run TED Talk event that hosts annual events to offer a platform for local voices to echo throughout and beyond the Pioneer Valley. Thank you all so much for attending today's fantastic schedule of events. Being a raging extrovert, I'm so happy to be having interesting conversations and watching people engage with the YouTube chat and on social media and during the panels and Q&As. Thank you all for tuning in and your patience as we navigate the little technical difficulties and hiccups. I want to say thank you to each and every one of the team members and people who've helped out immensely to make this happen. Achu, Andy, Harshita, Nathan, Walt, Fiza, Michaela, Nalima, Cheyenne, Sunita, Alex. I'd also like to thank CN1 Productions, Downright Productions, and Pine Box Studios for producing our talks and making them look beautifully professional. Again, I'd like to thank the Eisenberg School of Management at UMass, the Center for Data Science, the UMass College of Engineering, Bueno Isano, Amherst Works, Guayaquil, Own Practice, and Cabot. I am so grateful for these companies and organizations and the support that they've given us. I would like to announce the VIP raffle winners. We did the drawing today for 5 winners. The prizes include a Guayaquil gift box. If you guys don't know what Guayaquil is, it's a company that produces yerba mate, a yerba mate drink, which is a tea, an Argentinian tea. I'm an ambassador for the company, and I can attest that their drinks are really good. But they have these beautiful gift boxes with all the different flavors, and traditionally yerba mate is drank out of a wooden gourd with a filter straw, and so there's one of those in there. There's some loose leaf. They're beautiful gift boxes, and so Deb Burwell and Elisa Brewer, congratulations, you both have won one of those. There's also an incredible Cabot cheese gift box from Cabot Cheese and Rongbing Shen. You won that, so congratulations. Own Practice, which is an online interactive yoga company that is based here in Western Massachusetts. They're a small startup and a really cool company that I got the chance to work for about 1.5 years. And they offered up a 1-year membership, a free 1-year membership for one winner, and that lucky winner is Dominique Tabo, I think is how you say your last name. And lastly, there's a Pita Pocket gift card, and Kinsley Akins, congratulations, you won that. So congrats to each and every one of you. We will send you an email in the next couple days with information about what you've won and how you can receive your prize, how we can get that to you. The last thing we have on the schedule today is a 30-minute networking block just like yesterday. The link will be in the chat, in the email you received this morning, and on our website. The networking platform that we're using is called High Fidelity. It's really, really, really cool, and I cannot say this enough. It's audio only, so you really don't have to worry about whether or not you're wearing pants or whether or not your hair's done. You can just chat with people. I'll be on there. Some of the teammates will be on there. And we just want to ask you what your favorite talk was, what your favorite part of the event was. And it's cool you have this like aerial view of a pool party, and you get to like move around and stuff and go swimming. And so please join, because that'll be really fun. And it's a quick 30 minutes to close out the day so we can have a little bit more connection in this time of isolation. And lastly, I'd like to thank each and every one of you. I hope you enjoyed today's program. Again, this is TEDx Amherst Re-Envision. We hope to see you this summer. We're probably going to be doing some small in-person events, hopefully, fingers crossed. But thank you all for tuning in so much. Again, my name is Ruby, and if you want to watch the talks that you saw in the past 2 days, you can look at them on YouTube or on our website in the coming week. We'll have them up there, and they'll just be accessible to anybody. We'll also probably post the panels and breakouts that we did, as well as Q&As if you want access to those. So lastly, thank you one more time. From the bottom of my heart, I am so grateful that this got to happen even during such a crazy and uncertain time. I hope everyone enjoyed it, and I hope you have a great rest of your Sunday. Thank you so much.